Welcome, everyone, to Belmont Forum's Data and Digital Output Management Plan course. There are 4 modules altogether. We are going to start with the course introduction. My name is Shelley Stahl. I'm the Vice President at the American Geophysical Union for Open Science Leadership. And along with my colleague, Alison Specht, who resides in Australia and is a research analyst at Turn, the university, and also affiliated with the University of Queensland, we will bring to you 4 modules to help you better understand the Belmont Forum's Data Digital Outputs Management Plan and integrate it in with your research workflow. So let us begin. It's important as we have multidisciplinary teams and work across multiple countries that we respect and honor the lands where we reside for our own research. And those traditional owners and custodians of those land, seas, and all of the nations, we honor their profound connections to land, water, biodiversity, and culture, and pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So what we'll learn. We're going to first start with what is a DDOMP, so Data and Digital Output Management Plan, the purpose and the value. We'll talk about the relationship between it and the research question and the workflow, and then we'll move on to how open science practices are integrated and intertwined with it, and then what are the overview of the elements that we're recommending for you to include within your DDOMP. So to begin, what is a DDOMP? First of all, especially in these last few years, the funders who primarily require the DDOMP, the Belmont Forum being one of them, and the nations that are part of the consortium that's part of the Belmont Forum, they have different terms. And I just want you to know that overall, the goals are the same. So you could have something that includes the words digital, software, open science, and sharing. And there's, for instance, just recently, NASA has updated their requirements to be open science and data management plan. And there's other variations of that. We're pretty much saying the same thing. And within our slides, we're going to be using the acronym DDOMP because we're primarily focused on Belmont Forum. Belmont Forum is looking at teams that are multinational, multidisciplinary. So what we have here in these modules will apply to most other situations, no matter what funder you're working with or what type of research you're doing. So we're hoping for this to be valuable broadly. So humorously, you might recall in Romeo and Juliet, William Shakespeare wrote the phrase, what's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. And this is the idea here that no matter what you call it, data management plan, DDOMP, we're really talking about the same concepts. So this is a depiction of the processes involved with research with a highlight with those data and digital objects. And what we're digging in on now is how we perceive a DDOMP as it relates to research workflow. So we have at the very top middle there, you're either identifying existing data, you're creating it, you're acquiring it. These are not sequential. We know, I mean, typically a Belmont Forum grant is a multi-year event. You are, grounding yourself in that first year and you're exploring the research question. These things are iterative, they change. You might be pulling together different data to look at it. You may set that aside and go find additional data, depending on how your question is evolving. In the middle, we're talking about how the team works together. We're talking about the way we connect information using persistent identifiers. All of this is stored temporarily for the project, for the team. There's analysis, visualization, and then at the end, we preserve that data through a data deposition. So just to orient us all, these are the different processes, and for all the modules, we'll be using this particular image in order to walk you through the different pieces. So you'll see it again. The highlight here, and the part that is that that should give you an answer to some of the frustration should you have tried to put together your own data management plan in the past, is that because it's a funder requiring that, they really only give direction on the end of the project. They give direction on the preservation of the output, the sharing of that output, and that they ask you for this plan at the proposal at the beginning. So if you're looking for something that where you're prescient enough to know what will happen years from now, and they want it at the beginning, you scratch your head and say, well, that's not really logical. But yet, in fact, that's what they're asking. So what we are calling to your attention is that the entire research workflow, all of these pieces, identifying, acquiring, and collating, these are all things that happen, all things that also include data and digital objects. And it's only those last pieces that are mapping to what the funder is asking. This is very frustrating. It really means that they just want the information that comes at the end, and they're not guiding you in any way. And that's fine on all of the pieces that are happening within the workflow. And the way we approach the data and digital outputs management plan is actually to resolve this conflict, this anomaly. We want to help you see that what the funder is asking for is very important, but the way to get there is actually to look at your entire workflow. And by doing so, you receive a value that makes it more motivational for you to actually do this. Instead of being a check mark for your proposal, it actually becomes an integral plan that you're going to be using for your entire research. That's what it should be. That's what it should have always been. And that's hopefully what you'll see with this presentation today. So the evolution, how do we evolve from what a funder asks for, which they can only ask for so much, to what a researcher actually needs? So that data management plan is a workbook. We flip it around. We say, okay, we need a workbook. We need different versions, and we're going to go from a data management plan to a data management workbook. We're going to stop talking about outputs, and we're going to talk about objects. These are things that are all the way through your workflow. They're not just an end product. And we're going to evolve from sharing and preserving and sharing to the entire workflow, as we had on that right side of the slide before. And this is no longer a funder requirement. This is now a best practice within your community. This actually makes sense, and it's something you really want to do because you see the value in it, right? So that's what we're going to do. This is a diagram that you will also see throughout the 4 modules. And I just want to use it as a timeline. That pre-proposal, full proposal award, the Belmont Forum actually has 3 versions of a DDOMP. They each build on each other. So pre-proposal comes first. Sometimes they don't ask for all 3, but nonetheless, there's 3 defined. And during all of this, you're going to be presenting in conferences. You'll have early ideas that you're going to share. So you will have output, and you want to track all of that. And that's on the top. That's the yellow bar on the top. And then on the bottom, you have the objectives that are built into the DDOMP in order to where you track on how you're going to capture all of that and make sure it's following the processes that you've determined. So the activities within the project, the way you communicate, those we have to track, like what conferences are you going to, what posters have you created? As each of the things as your research progresses, you're going to have space where you're sharing this information, you're sharing the data, you're sharing the software. We will give you information about that. And then when the legacy of the project and closing it out, we'll hit on that as well. Okay, all right. So that's this diagram. The QR code gets you to more information about that. So should you be sitting with someone else or by yourself, take a look at this activity. In your mind, what types of data and digital objects are associated with research projects? So you can pause this and think about it. or not, and we will keep going. Here's a list. Here's a list of them. So not sure if this was something that you had considered, but all of these things are part of your the objects that you're creating and managing, as well as your outputs. Everything from data and data sets, the software using the different words that we do within research, code and models, physical samples. So physical samples, something you touch, but there are descriptive digital descriptions about those physical samples that are also managed. Audio, video, white papers. These are usually early thinking documents, concept documents. So not everybody does a white paper, but it's something that contributes to the research over time. Perhaps training materials, workshop materials, reports, preprints for certain. The posters and presentations that you give at conferences, and finally, what anchors our scientific record, in addition to all of this, is the peer-reviewed publications. So these are all of the things that you're tracking. And perhaps you have other suggestions to add in here. So the purpose and value, what exactly is it? Let's get a roadmap and an understanding of that purpose and value. So this definition here is an amalgam of from different sources that are talking about the different types of data management plans out there. It's a formal document. It outlines how research data and other digital objects, such as software, physical samples, audio, video, things that we just listed on the prior slide, how they're collected, organized, stored, preserved, and shared throughout the life cycle of a research project. It ensures proper data and digital object handling, accessibility within the team and outside the team, depending on the timing, compliance with ethical and funding agency requirements, as well as relevant national laws. No matter what, we do not break laws. We just do not. We have to honor them all. And we have to honor each of our countries that are participating in a project, honor all of their requirements as well. This is a roadmap for managing your data and digital objects, digital outputs as well, during and after the research project. Those are your outputs, enabling the reuse and verification by others. So this is a good, solid definition that works for, if you call it a data management plan, a DDOMP, you add in sharing, you add in open science, doesn't matter. This works well for all applications. So what's important here? Why is this important for us? Why is this important for our community? And we've now flipped over to using object instead of output and workbook instead of plan, although we won't change the acronym. It'll remain DDOMP. Our funders require them. They're trying to encourage sharing. They're trying to encourage openness for especially government funding, to make sure that we are providing that information out to the citizens of each of the countries that are our funders. Integrity. This actually helps integrity when you put the time in to actually document all of these processes, promoting the transparency. This is the base platform for research integrity. So it's very helpful. We'll have another slide that walks through that as well to give you a visualization. It supports collaboration. One of the things that's really rather unique is, especially with the Belmont Forum, is that all of their CRAs, their opportunities for proposals and working towards these multinational challenges that we have, is that they require collaboration across countries. And so they're uniquely, every single grant will always have multicultural teams coming together from different backgrounds. We really have to pay attention to the communication elements and the different needs of each of those researchers. And in Module 2, we're actually going to talk about that at length. So in this last one, number 4, efficient data and digital object management, it's really important that we treat our data and digital objects as assets, and that we create efficiencies and protections organization for around them, And that improves the quality of analysis that we have. Imagine doing analysis on the wrong version of data. We all have done it at one point, and you just hit your head. You're like, darn it, I know better. I have to start over because I was using the wrong data set. So hopefully that resonates with all of you. So on the Belmont Forum pages, they have a shorter definition, but many pages that describe. But I wanted you to have this so that you're aware of it, because it resonates with these previous slides as well. Data being organized is shareable, reproducible. Attribution helps researchers gain recognition and credibility by sharing their data. So there's a lot of these elements here, and just reminding you that there are the 3 levels of formats that Belmont Forum requires, and those depend on where you are within the award cycle. We will look at the full awarded format, because that's where all the complexities are, and certainly pre-proposal is just a lot easier. So we want to make sure you understand what the point is when you put a pre-proposal format together. And the link to that quote is there down below. All right, so the value. So we just talked about purpose, and now the value. So these digital objects are assets. These are generated and are valuable not only to your research, but very likely they're going to be valuable to other research efforts as well. So we want to ensure that they're being treated that way, managed and protected. It's important to understand those digital objects through good documentation. So we talk about them being well documented. This is commonly called metadata, and making sure it's compliant with the disciplines that you have, and most especially at the time of preservation, that documentation goes with the data or data sets or the digital objects that are being preserved. And that we're using community best practices as we understand them today. And those, of course, are constantly evolving. And that we preserve these digital objects. And that the objects that are supporting our research findings are clearly part of the scientific record. So they demonstrate transparency, they demonstrate that research integrity we talked about earlier, and they very high probability that they'll be reused for yet a similar research question, or perhaps a completely different one. So these 3 items are the value. So valuable to you in the future, valuable to you now. We're moving on to the next section. So this one tries to pull all of this together and give you a visualization on what this relationship is between the research question you have in your mind, and I'm sure all of us have multiple things we're thinking about. So thinking about that as an evolving concept, the workflow as an evolving concept, and then how the DDOMP reacts in those situations. So here you have the proverbial 3-legged stool. All right. So this is your research project, and you are supported by these 3 things. First of all, that research question. That research question has a scope. Because it's a Belmont Forum grant, you will have a number of disciplines that are involved, and you will have multiple different types of resources needed, and both people and potentially lab resources, and then that grounds that first element, that first leg. And then the second one being the workflow itself. These are not in stone. We do not take the same workflow. We learn, we evolve, we iterate. We say, oh, that didn't work. We go back, we reframe it. And sometimes we inform what that research question is and tweak that a little bit and then come back at it. These are all part of research. Disciplines have different norms. So if this isn't quite what your discipline does, I think you can understand that, we're talking broadly here, and that these workflows involve data, the people, the tools, the process. And it's important that every single person on your team understands what the expected workflow is. And, I could have easily had data, comma, digital objects. So please do infer that we're representing data as all of the digital object types. Some of us have research that is looking at audio only, for instance, and that's, we certainly do include that. And then as we're learning, as we're iterating, we are redocumenting, we are updating the documentation on how we're going to protect and manage the data and other digital objects, and that's the DDOMP. And because we're documenting it, we're creating an opportunity for efficiency. It means everyone on the team, and Belmont Forum teams can be really big, everyone on the team has a way to stay connected, and we intentionally make sure those team members understand what's happening. Module 2 will get into that in more depth. And this is foundation for innovation. By coordinating all of this in a way that's very intentional and across different cultures, across different languages, you take the time to do it, because what will come as the outcome of your research will benefit from all of that. Okay, let's go on. So how does open science integrate with the DDOMP? Open science could be its own modules. So we are going to do it, we're going to integrate it with the modules themselves. But if you've not yet been exposed, it is a methodology to work openly so that others have access to the work that we have. So looking here at this first paragraph, open science practices support collaborative working on multinational convergent research that fosters communication, teamwork, and ultimately the best possible innovative outcomes. So this is specifically written for a Belmont Forum project. Open science can also be a small project. Just know that. It could actually be a small project, but it's really valuable to include open science practices, especially when you have complex teams, because you work openly within the team. Even before you share it outwardly, you have to learn to work openly within your team. And modules 3 and 4 are going to really help out with that understanding, equipping the team for actual open science practices. So the values embedded in open science practices are the same values that help research teams do their best work. So this is what we'll share with you so that you can take advantage of them too. And I think many of them will be very logical. And we capture those practices. What are we expecting the entire research team to do? So we do have places that we're recommending within the DDOMP where you actually capture the expectation around those open science practices. So research is people, it's smart people, and each of us has different skill sets, we have different experiences and different tools. And when you form your team, you really have to plan for exactly what you need to solve your problem. And remember that, sometimes when we pull teams together, having different optics and different experiences, not even sometimes, but every time, especially for a Belmont Forum grant, having experiences that are across the globe to be able to solve a problem that is global is required. And so when you're working towards having really exciting innovation, thinking about what all of those resources are, all of those tools, it's not just the digital objects you need, it's the people who know how to work with those digital objects and find them. That's part of this too. So even though we talk about it being a data and digital object management plan or workbook, it's the people doing it that makes the innovation happen. And we have to account for that as well. So we don't leave people out when we work on the workbook. Alrighty. So the open science journey, I talk about it, and other people talk about it. You never get there. You never complete your open science journey. It's something you continue to do better at. It's not a binary. You're not open or closed. It is an evolution where you learn to do new and better things. And this is what we'll do. We'll create an opportunity for you to, through the DDOMP as a framework, add in new or reinforcing things that you already knew to include within your research project. Everything from the communication modes, remembering that we have challenges with languages and culture, and you have to account for that when you're communicating on a team. Shared workspace, sharing everything at one person's institution is not going to work for a multinational team. You just have to know that. That is not equitable. So you need to think about it in a different way. How we give feedback, how we're flexible. Different people have different needs within a research project. It's important that we understand what those are. Some people will have time during different parts of the year. Some people are in field work in June and July. Other people are in field work at January and February. Um, you have to know all of these things. So there's an opportunity to pay attention to what the flexibility is of your team and the fact that you'll have to think through surge efforts and when everyone can come together. Training and guidance. You're gonna introduce ideas that maybe not even everyone is all about, who is supporting or even knows about. You'll have to share and train and provide guidance so that they feel comfortable. If you're asking a team to use a common modeling tool, for instance, and it's new to half your team, it's tough. It's tough for people to actually trust something that's new like that. You need to give them an opportunity to do that. And you're building trust is what you're doing. And you see trust all the way up this diagram. And then being open science, being fair, as in fair data, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. And we just touch here a little bit on the CARE principles. Those are for Indigenous data sovereignty. The CARE community is working on what it means to actually implement those right now. So at this time for this particular video, we don't have a whole lot to give you examples on, except to be aware that you want to be cautious around data that's either by is it about Indigenous peoples or impacts Indigenous peoples, that there might be additional steps that you'll want to take in order to maintain trust and collaboration with those communities. All right, let's keep going. So an overview of each of the workbook sections. All right, so this is a little fiddly. So we're going to walk through them. There are 12 altogether. There's 2 slides. Actually, there's 12 operating procedures, but there are different sections. So let's start with the sections and then we'll get to the operating procedures. So we're going to cover some of these sections in other modules. This module, we're going to talk about the change log. We're going to talk about that's number 1. Number 3, the operating procedures. And the items number 2, 4, and 5, we're going to cover in some of the other modules. So the change log, it's important that you track the changes to your document. The team member roles, a data and digital output management plan is something that you manage throughout the entire research life cycle. That's a new concept. You're going to actually have to pay attention and assign and then follow up and make sure that that new activity is actually being done. That'll be something worth paying attention to as to how you do that and the authority that's necessary for your multinational, multidisciplinary group to do. There might be a little bit of cajoling. There might be a little bit of like, if you get this done, you get a gold star. I don't know. Whatever it takes for your particular research team to do something new. It can be a little creative on your side. The 12 operating procedures, we'll get to those in just a second. We'll cover that in this module, all of them, and then in detail in the other 3. The tracking sheets and code of conduct, tracking sheets to make sure you're actually tracking the things that you need to track, and for the digital objects. And then the code of conduct, these are the behaviors that we're looking for. And you're gonna see that in detail in Module 3. Module 3 will actually walk you through these behaviors in detail so you can actually have a common understanding for your entire team. They're logical. They're very logical. It's nothing too nutto. So when we constructed the workbook, I want to give you some background as to the different resources that we used so that you can understand that we were in strong alignment, very strong alignment with what the Belmont Forum is asking for, and the open science best practices, and how we actually mapped all of those to make sure everything was included for you. So we did use all of their guidance and requirements that are on all of the web pages that are available to you in the Belmont Forum materials. There's also a scorecard that they created for evaluating a DDOMP. We used that to make sure that we had included everything, and that's also openly available. Your anticipated research workflow, we don't know exactly what each of you is going to be doing in your workflow or is doing, but this is meant to be the pieces that you can implement and adjust to be flexible to your workflow. So we're trying to think of everything. We might not have, but I think we'll have enough for you that you can mold it into what you're actually doing. And it should work for you just fine. If there's an opportunity for feedback at one of the sessions where either Allison and I are, or somebody from the Belmont Forum, if you find that there could be an additional information, that would be valuable for us to know. We would like to make sure that this works for everyone. Open science best practices, those are integrated all the way through these modules. And we had a large team of data and digital object experts that were part of the creation of all of these materials, plus we vetted with hundreds and hundreds of other researchers. So there was a real opportunity to do this. There's a clip here of our mapping document. If this is not something we're providing publicly, but I want you to know each of the elements, each of the different types of the DDOMP that the Belmont requires, each of the operating procedures that we have defined within the DDOMP and the Belmont Forum scorecard, all of the different numbered elements, we made sure that they were aligned. And you'll see that sometimes the scorecard didn't have something, or sometimes there's a piece missing over here. We actually filled in all of the gaps so that these modules give you the whole thing in one place. So I hope if you find it valuable. So on to the operating procedures. These are all within the materials that are being provided along with this video. So you will be able to touch and read more about these, and we'll talk more about them in the modules coming forward. So let's start at the beginning. The operating procedure, and we use this, you could call it something else. You can call it like, your favorite, whatever you want to name these things. Just for us, we call them operating procedures. Selecting the digital outputs for preservation, it seems strange that you would do this first. You might not actually be able to answer this first, but this is one of the most important things for the Belmont Forum. What are you actually going to preserve? You might actually have to do some of these others first in order to get here. So just realize answering these sequentially might not be logical, and that's okay. You just, work what you can and then go back and fill in. If you have done, pretty much Belmont Forum researchers tend to be fairly experienced. So you've done this type of research before. You just write down what you commonly use in order to support your research findings. What type of data is it? And that's it. That's going to be it. And you preserve what you create. You don't preserve somebody else's data. You preserve what you create. So that should help figure it out. And then within the workbook that we're giving you, we actually walk you through how to think about it. So I took a lot of time here on OP1, but I won't do that for the other 11 because we actually walk you through all of these things, and modules 2, 3, and 4 do that for you. So this is an overview, and then you'll get more details in modules 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so how to protect your digital objects during your project. And I highlighted during the life of the project because I want you to understand the difference between when you're working on them and when you preserve them to be part of the scientific record. Two different moments in time. And the Belmont Forum cares about that too. So how do you ensure the quality of your digital objects during the project? How do you make sure you don't overwrite something, right? Something like that. What does it mean to provide data security and privacy, intellectual property restrictions? You have to know what all of those are for each of the data sets, especially if you're using somebody else's. And what does it mean for derived data sets? And then applying those same things to other digital objects. OP5, making sure this changes direction a little bit, and we're talking about collaboration and authorship. Determine up front how you're going to do authorship. It's really important that you all have a common understanding, just like with a paper. What does it mean to have authorship of data? And there's an opportunity here to include everyone that actually contributed to the creation of that data, creation, and curation. You should include everyone. Any technicians, any students, any postdocs. This is an opportunity for everyone who played a part to be recognized. And then making sure people have the opportunity to collaborate. It is, we'll talk more about that in Module 2, but when you have a large team, inviting 100% of the group to do something doesn't mean you're going to actually get what you need. How are you going to make those decisions on when we're collaborating on an activity? How do we determine who is the right person to do that activity? So this is important. We don't want anyone to be on a team and not feel like their contribution is valued. You want to make sure everyone has a chance to contribute. And then number 6, OP6 is also part of this. Not only should you be citing within, let's say, a peer-reviewed publication, it could also be an oral presentation or a preprint. If you're citing a data set created by your team, yes, you should cite that. But if you're citing somebody else's data as well, if you're using somebody else's data, give attribution. It's also part of the scientific record. And this is one of the things that we all need muscle memory on doing. Not just citing a journal article that you're using, but if you're using somebody else's data or software or any of the other digital objects, make sure it's all included. It matters because credit to the person who created that is valuable. And every year, institutions are recognizing that more and more. And we need to create that expectation that attribution happens. Okay, I'm going to go on to 7 through 12. So licensing, we have to make sure that data and digital objects are properly licensed in order for as much openness as possible. The metadata, this is one of the hardest ones. OP8 is one of the hardest ones to do because not every community has well-documented metadata standards that are community supported. So this is where you talk to sometimes societies or some learned organizations that are really leading when it comes to data preservation. They can help you figure out what the best possible metadata are. Then where do you actually preserve your digital object? OP9 is also harder than you might think. You want this to be in a place that helps you with the metadata. You don't want to just throw it in a generalist repository with no documentation whatsoever. So we have a lot of information on this particular item. Managing sensitive or restricted data, also a challenge. So people data, health data, location data, depending on if it's like for fossils. This is important that we comply with this, and there are usually laws, country laws about this. Determining costs. For the project that Allison and I did with Parsec, we actually identified repositories that were free to us, but that's not always the case. And the time it takes to curate data is also not free. So here's where you have an opportunity to think through what it's going to cost. And then if it's not free, you can, many of our national funders allow for data management to be included in the funding request. So this is where you would calculate all of that. And then it's important that your project is protected during its lifetime and when you're closing it out. Because when the funding runs out, usually your website runs out, and it's that what you've done is important and part of the scientific record. And people are going to want to know about all of the other objects that you have and what exactly does it look like when you close a project out. So there you are. Those are the 12. That's your DDOMP. This is important for you to think through each of these. So in addition, to help track, we identify 4 different groupings. So of all of the different digital objects we've talked about, the one that has commonly across all researchers will be of high value are going to be your peer-reviewed scholarly publications. This is where everything that goes into it has to be, every digital object supporting it has to be preserved. This will be where when we're talking about outputs, this is where all of that work will be. Things that are outputs from your project that supporting your scholarly publication. Other types of outputs, the non-peer-reviewed digital outputs. So these are your data sets that are cited in your scholarly publication, the software cited in your scholarly publication, and then all of the things that led up to the publication, the materials from the conferences, the posters, the presentations, and such. They may or may not be cited in your peer-reviewed publication, but they are definitely contributions to the work that you're doing so far. The data sets, while they're being used in the project, you want to track those. Are they updated? Is the curation updated? Do they have to be revised? Have somebody corrected something that needs to be updated? Did you keep the initial file and no one wrote over it? Like sometimes we have to block permissions so that the initial version of a data set doesn't get overwritten by accident. This happens, we know that. And then software as well. Is your software development platform have version control? Is it accessible to everyone? And have we made decisions on exactly how that's all going to work? This is all the tracking. The change log. So we have the change log at the very top of our template for the DDOMP. This is the tracking of the changes you're making for the decisions on all those 12 things that we walked through. You are going to change your minds on certain things. That's going to happen because you're going to learn something and you're going to iterate. That's the nature of research. So we want to make sure that that change log is managed, and you're going to forget on the first version. Unless some brilliant person puts it in there, you're going to forget. The first one is simple. It's version 1, initial document. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Get that one in there. And then the next version you'll remember, oh yeah, version 2, I need to write down that I added this section, I updated this section, and why. Just a few words, because you're going to want to remember the history of how you evolved and how you came to where you're going to be. And when new people join halfway through a project, they'll understand how you got from one place to another. Good. Okay. And don't forget that your DDOMP is also a digital object, so it needs to be preserved too, and it needs to be version controlled. So don't forget that part. Isn't that fun? All right, so now it's to you. Is there anything missing? Did we miss something that you think should have been here that we should have covered? Are you surprised that we didn't say something? Please make a note of that. And the folks that there'll be an opportunity to provide feedback either here or one of the Belmont Forum teams when you meet with them. Tell them so. Tell them that you would really like to know something else, especially in Module 1 on an overview. So you're welcome to pause right now and think about this. I'm going to keep moving though. So the next 3 modules, Module 2, Allison's going to do you'll get to meet Allison. She's going to introduce Module 2 and 3 to you and walk through the open data policy for the Belmont Forum, talk about those fair data principles that are so important, organizing your teams, how to implement those data management principles within your team, and then preserving your project, thinking through some strategies, which we'll cover more in Module 4. Module 3, getting those norms in place, getting those behaviors in place. What does it mean to actually get your team records organized? What does it mean to actually track those tracking sheets I was mentioning? She's going to actually give you the exact process that you can then tune to your own needs. How to make reporting not only to the Belmont Forum easier, but all of the countries that are involved, and then preparing for publication. Module 4, Allison and I will do this one together. We're going to talk more about those FAIR principles and the open data policies and those principles for Belmont. What does it mean to preserve your research project both during the project and then finally at closeout, including the data security, intellectual property. We'll cover, how to actually think through those costs, and then exactly what it means for closing out, backing up and closing out. So I hope this was helpful. The project that Allison and I are on is a funded Belmont Forum grant. We're at the very last few days of our statement of work. These are all of our partners across the world, and all of them contributed to all of the information that you're learning in these 4 modules. And have a wonderful day, and please move on to Module 2.